This week on Christian World News, aftermath of a massacre. As Sri Lanka's Christians grieve their losses, hear what this Christian leader has to say about the attacks on their churches and how to pray for that community.
Plus, in the midst of despair, a message of hope. See how some Venezuelan refugees in Colombia are struggling to survive and how they respond to the promise of new life.
And second act, this businessman could have retired at 65. Instead, he dedicated his retirement years to building up the global church. Today, that ministry has blessed more than 80 countries, people in 80 countries. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas.
Good to be with you. I'm Wendy Griffith. Well, it's been a week of mourning for the island nation of Sri Lanka. Of bombings on Easter Sunday killed at least 250 people and injured more than 500. As loved ones buried their dead, Sri Lankan officials are warning there are still terrorists on the run with explosives. This week's church services are canceled. On Easter morning around 8:45 local time, 7 Islamic suicide bombers in a coordinated attack struck 3 churches and 3 luxury hotels in and around the capital city, Colombo. One of the largest explosions ripped through St. Anthony's Catholic Church just as congregants were filling the pews for Easter service. 39 foreigners were also killed, including at least 4 Americans and 8 British nationals.
In this week's edition of World Beat, I spoke with one of Sri Lanka's top Christian leaders from Colombo. The Right Reverend Daniel Thiagaraja talked about the impact this attack is having on the Christian community.
Christians, the first hand, they are sad, they are grieved, they really don't know what they can do except to weep for the lost ones. Because they never expected this to happen. And now that it has happened, they don't know what to do. We have been to the hospitals where the injured are being treated. It's a horrific scene there. Very difficult even to look at the injured persons. So how can we look at those who are died, those who are dead now? Very difficult, very difficult.
ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attacks, and Sri Lankan government officials believe it was in retaliation for the massacre of Muslims at a mosque in New Zealand. What's your feeling about this?
Yes, I have also heard about this, but that is a secondary question for me, because this has happened now. Let us not say this is in retaliation of this and that. That is not the thing. Now that the thing has happened, this horrendous act has happened, what are we going to do next? That should be in our minds now.
Is there concern right now that there could be more incidents against Christians?
Definitely, that is our fear, because they say, the reports say that there were plans to attack 27 places simultaneously on Easter Sunday. Only 3 + 3 = 6, and 2 other small places were targeted. Therefore, what are the other places? We don't know. Whether they are still, the bombs are being carried by some vehicles or some people. We don't know. Therefore, we are on the alert. Anything may happen at any time. Definitely, Sri Lankan Christian community, they are frightened. They are frightened because this has happened in their lives for the first time, and which they never expected to happen. We are a peace-loving community. We have been always maintaining that peace and harmony in the country, which has undergone 3 decades of civil war. Irrespective of who we have been, we always cooperated with one another in maintaining peace and harmony in the country. Now we are worried.
Are you worried at all that Christians might retaliate and launch attacks against Muslims?
I doubt, because I believe that the Christians will never resort to that kind of an act of retaliation.
Bishop Daniel, how can we pray for the church today in Sri Lanka?
It is a very important question, and you have to pray that we are definitely sustained by God's grace, that our faith is enhanced. It is not diminished but enhanced because we always hoped against hope in the past experience in the country. Whether it was a natural calamity or human-made calamity, we underwent such calamities, and all the times we were hoping against hope. And now once again we are bound for that. Therefore we pray that all our brothers and sisters around the globe will pray with us and for us that our faith is enhanced.
For many parts of the global church, violence and oppression is part of daily life. But here in America, there's a sense Christians don't understand the level of persecution that the body of Christ endures in other nations. Doug Bandow, an analyst at the Cato Institute, wrote, Christianity's dominant role in American culture has obscured the fact that it is the most persecuted faith globally. And Emma Green, an Atlantic writer, says that Easter has become a, quote, anniversary of death, noting Easter attacks on Christians in Egypt and Nigeria in the last several years. On CBN Newswatch, religious freedom advocate Dr. Daniel Marks says the attack should remind believers to stand up for their suffering brothers and sisters.
I think Christians who, of course, are extremely charitable and extremely caring to people worldwide, could maybe even so take a lesson in this and make sure that on the top of their minds at all times is the persecuted church around the world, which will help them appreciate what we have here.
The bombings also serving to bring the church in Sri Lanka together. Evangelical and Pentecostal leaders are expressing solidarity with the Catholic community after the attacks on their churches.
As Sri Lanka continues to mourn, stories of the heroes who risked their lives to save others are coming to light. One of those heroes is Ramesh Ramu. Ramu spotted a suicide bomber lurking outside Zion Church in Batikola. More than 450 worshippers were packed inside. Ramu prevented him from approaching a courtyard full of Sunday school children. The bomber detonated himself outside the church, killing Ramu instantly. 29 people died in the attack, including the pastor's son. It's impossible to know how many lives Ramu saved by that very simple act.
God bless him and his family. Coming up, refugees fleeing poverty and political repression find a message of hope from the Reverend Franklin Graham.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I Wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
And welcome back to Christian World News. The arrest of a Baptist pastor in southern Russia is raising concerns of a new wave of persecution against evangelicals and other minority faiths. Radio Free Europe reports that authorities raided 72-year-old Pastor Yuri Kornikov's church this past month and charged him with illegal evangelism. If convicted, the pastor will face heavy fines. Back in 2016, Russia outlawed all missionary work outside officially recognized church buildings. Many view it as a crackdown on congregations outside the Russian Orthodox Church.
Sudan's Christians are calling for equal rights under the law. Baptist, Presbyterian, and other church leaders joined protesters in Khartoum recently, calling for a new government that guarantees democracy and human rights. This after the military forced out dictator Omar Bashir earlier this month. The Christian leaders joined with Muslims to call for reform, even singing hymns together. Curry Kawende of Christian Solidarity Worldwide described the scene for the Global News Alliance.
We saw a wonderful moment where Christians were actually invited to join in the protests. Until this time, the church had been a bit hesitant because they've suffered so many years of repression under the Sudanese regime. They were hesitant to come out and be visible. However, the Sudanese Professionals Association, which is organizing the protests, explicitly invited them to join in, acknowledge the repression that they've experienced. And we saw a wonderful moment on Sunday where Christians were able to join in, and they held a mass, an ecumenical mass. They had church leaders giving presentations, there was worship, and Christians and Muslims sang songs together.
The Sudanese military remains in control of the government. The protesters are calling for them to step aside in favor of a democracy.
From Sudan, we turn to Paris, where investigators there are narrowing possible causes of the blaze that devastated historic Notre Dame Cathedral during Holy Week. Folks are specifically paying attention to a possible short circuit in the electrical wiring system, but they also discovered cigarette butts on the scaffolds, raising the possibility that a workman might have accidentally started the fire, even though smoking was forbidden. Meanwhile, on Easter Sunday, a special mass was held to honor the firemen who put out the blaze.
Hope they discover what happened there.
That's right.
Well, the United Nations has called the exodus of refugees from Venezuela unparalleled in the modern history of South America. More than 1 million of the nation's 4 million refugees have fled to the neighboring nation of Colombia.
Well, there, many had an encounter with Jesus Christ over Easter weekend. Charlene Aaron has the story.
A broken economy magnified by a political crisis and power outages is forcing millions of Venezuelans to flee their country. CBN correspondent Chuck Holton has described the desperate situation for those crossing into the border town of Cúcuta, Colombia.
So this is the illegal way to get across from Venezuela into Colombia. It's called La Trocha. These guys are bringing products either into Colombia to sell or back into Venezuela. Things that aren't available there, things like tires, things like medicines. Coming across from Venezuela, we're seeing a lot of scrap metal that they sell over in the Colombian side. We see things like copper wire, because people are ripping the wires out of the walls and wrapping them up and bringing them over here to sell just to get enough money to eat.
Prostitution by Venezuelan girls is rampant. Lionel Castillo and his wife work with their church to help them.
The wealthiest Venezuelans have already escaped to Spain or Miami. The middle class is going to Ecuador or Chile. But the poorest and most vulnerable are coming to Cúcuta.
Venezuelans have been suffering under one of the worst humanitarian disasters in modern times. But this week, tens of thousands of refugees received the ultimate gift of hope.
Tonight, if you're here and you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior, tonight you can be sure.
It was called the Festival of Hope, and the Graham team chose the strategic location of Cúcuta to share the gospel to Colombians and Venezuelan refugees as well.
The physical needs, I think, of the people, God sometimes uses that to open up the hearts spiritually.
Christian ministries like Graham's Samaritan's Purse and CBN's Operation Blessing have sent teams to provide food, hygiene kits, and medical care to the refugees. As the humanitarian crisis worsens, the U.S. and other nations are increasing pressure on the Maduro government and his allies, Russia and Cuba. Graham considers the Cuban officials and military personnel who are propping up leader Nicolas Maduro a big obstacle to change.
It's really the Cubans. The Cubans have taken control of the country, and they have taken control of this government. They've taken control of the military. It's almost like Cuba has annexed the country.
As the Venezuela crisis deepens, the U.S. and other nations aren't ruling out military force. Graham says he hopes and prays for a solution that does not involve military force and more suffering for the Venezuelan people. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thanks, Charlene. Coming up, when others were retiring, he was just getting started. As a result, thousands of churches are building God's kingdom around the world.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
You know, I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man. Come with...
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
Welcome back. Businessman Dois Rosser could have retired in luxury at age 65. Instead, he chose to use his talents for spreading God's kingdom. The result, thousands of churches planted across the globe.
Well, some 30 years later, daughter Janice Allen heads the ministry, but her father, now well into his 90s, still keeps his hand in the work. Take a look.
Janice Allen is the CEO of International Cooperating Ministries, an organization working to change the world, one church building at a time.
We, I think, always felt that the Church of Jesus Christ is God's own plan for distributing the gospel.
ICM's mission is to help congregations around the world learn God's Word and build their own churches.
We are partnering with indigenous groups that are already doing this type of ministry, but they lack the facilities and the resources to really be able to do it adequately.
Janice's father, Dois Rosser, is the founder of ICM. He first got the idea at a time when most people are thinking about retirement.
At the age of 65, my father had been very, very successful in the business world.
In the business world, you look to maximize. We ran, I think, 27 different franchises at one time. But what you do is look for ways to get it done. Well, if we do that in the business world, why shouldn't we do it in the kingdom?
With that, Rosser started working to make a radio broadcast series called Mini Bible College, available to people around the world. The in-depth study written by Pastor Dick Woodward had revived Rosser's own faith, and he wanted to share its message. Later, when he visited some of those countries, he saw another very basic need: church buildings.
And the best example of that is that there's 600,000 villages in India. 650 million people, that's twice the population of the United States, live in those villages. You can't send enough missionaries. You can't afford to send them from all the various denominations. You've got to equip the nationals. So what happened, when we built a church in a village, we could change a whole village.
Then, using his own money, Rosser founded ICM. For the next 30 years, the organization would provide local congregations the needed funds to build a church in some of the world's darkest areas.
For example, when you think of Central America, 50% of the population may be under the age of 21, where you have some of the highest murder rates on the entire planet. The drugs and the violence and the teen pregnancy and the prostitution, that cycle is going to be perpetuated until the gospel of Jesus Christ steps in and changes people's hearts and gives them a different future, gives them a different hope.
Janice says that the church is often the only proper building in the community.
When these villagers and these rural congregations have a building, they're using the buildings for schools, they're using the buildings for medical clinics. Many times they will put the only clean water well at the place of the church.
Some of the churches serve people in desperate need of refuge.
We began hearing stories of how the churches were becoming the safe havens for these people escaping the atrocities that were going on as they were fleeing their own countries.
Building the body of Christ hasn't come without persecution and violence.
This photo was brought into my office. I saw 2 railroad tracks, and on one side was a human head, and the other side was the body. And it was a 13-year-old boy who was the son of a pastor of an ICM church. And the extremists kidnapped him and beheaded him as a way to force his father to stop preaching the gospel. And he said, "We will not stop being Christ's presence here in this village, no matter what."
To date, ICM and its donors have funded nearly 6,500 churches in more than 80 countries and had the Mini Bible College translated into over 40 languages, and there's still more work to be done.
Well, the first thing you realize that man can't handle it. But what do you expect? If you read the history books, man has not been able to solve the problems of the world. God is the answer.
My father's obedience, when God just said, "Dois, just bring to me what your time and talents and abilities are, and I will do something with it." And he says that to each and every one of us. That's our opportunity we have to serve the King of Kings.
And for more stories like this, go to our website at cbnnews.com.
As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, "If you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together." At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way.
I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Welcome back to the broadcast. In February, Israel and the world lost a champion with the sudden death of Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein, founder of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews.
As CBN's Chris Mitchell explains, Eckstein's daughter, Yael, is carrying on the family legacy.
Many knew him as the ultimate bridge builder. Rabbi Eckstein started the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews in 1983. Since then, it's generated more than $1.5 billion to help Jews in Israel, the former Soviet Union, and more than 58 other countries. In a video message taped shortly before his death, Eckstein charged his daughter, Yael, with the mantle of his ministry.
Watch over this ministry. Feed it. Cultivate it. Don't let anyone say it's not of God.
I miss my father. I still can't comprehend and internalize I'm never going to see him again or get a hug from him. But I also feel a lot of light. I feel a lot of peace. I see a lot of God's hand within the tragedy.
Yael says her dad left a rich and prophetic work for her to lead.
Everything we do is prophetic. Suddenly we have Christians bringing from the biblical land of the north Jewish people on wings of eagles home to Israel. That's prophecy. That's what Isaiah and Jeremiah, this is what they saw 2,000 years ago.
She also talked about key Christian leaders who influenced her father's life.
From the very, very beginning, Pat Robertson, along with many others like Pat Boone and Jack Hayford. But the way that Pat Robertson was just passionate about it, it seemed like he was praying for this, and God sent my father as the answer to prayers because he got it before my father even developed the whole idea.
Eckstein pursued three goals: build bridges between Christians and Jews, deepen Christian understanding of the Jewish roots of their faith, and develop a practical way to help the Jewish people and Israel. Yael believes that effort is more important than ever with the alarming rise in anti-Semitism.
It's in the American government. It's no longer fringe. It's very clear that we are fighting a war of light versus darkness, good versus bad, and everyone's at risk of falling, that we need to stand together.
Yael says she's grateful for the many prayers helping her make the transition from grief to building on her father's legacy. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Wow, he'll be missed.
Terrific, yes, absolutely. She's doing a terrific job with the ministry. Well, folks, that is it for this week's edition of Christian World News.
Until next week, from all of us here, goodbye and God bless you.